I'm going to talk about columns. Columns, columns and tables. They're similar, but different. So columns you use for like a newspaper article. You know how the columns go down? Everyone's old enough to know what a newspaper is, right? So the columns go down and you go over to the next one and you read it. So that's good for formatting issues if you want just a column of spaces to be read. Tables are for information on the left-hand side to correlate with the information on the right-hand side and go through that way. And that's when you use a table. That's the difference between the two. So let me format this real quick, take off the, so I'm gonna format this better because it's not formatted properly. And that makes sense. So I'm gonna put a column here, but I've noticed I don't have any images to show you about alt tags. So let me go get one and I'll put it in, and then I'll put it in columns for everybody. And then to insert a picture from my computer. And yeah, I gotta make that smaller. Nobody wants to see that big. All right, so here's a reasonably sized picture. Now for me to put a alt tag in this, you click it and it come up. So right now, this is a new thing I realized when I was getting this together. It gives you some auto descriptions, and that's in the new version of Word from 360. I'm sorry, I haven't probably. Yes, that's my wedding pic, Sharon. Any other things in the chat that I missed? So I would put a person wearing a suit smiling. The only thing I do about this auto description actually works. It's the only thing I would add just for the students' purposes. Instead of a person wearing it, I put Dr. Amar Abbott. And then say, and now it's alt tagged properly and it's good to go. Now, in order to put it in columns, I highlight it all. It's an insert, no, layout, sorry. So in layout, you have the columns tab. Hit columns, 2, and now you have 2 columns. Of course, you can format it. I'd probably make this more aesthetically pleasing, which is not necessary. Move it closer so it kind of looks similar. I have a typo down here. I'd fix that. And so that's how you put columns. Now I'm going to show you how to do. Any questions?
Amar, I have a question. So is the column properly identified just because there's a style on top of it that says instructor information, or a heading 2 on top of it that says instructor information? Does that make the column as accessible as it needs to be?
Yeah, because the screen reader should read the instructor information, and then it's going to go down to the alt tag, and then going to go to my credentials. If I'm understanding your correct, if you're understanding your question correctly,
So
are you talking about? Go ahead.
simple columns are okay as long as they have the right level header on top of them. Yeah.
So simple columns are okay. If this wasn't a header at all, it still would be fine because it's gonna read it properly. It's
It's
gonna
not
jump.
a table.
What was that?
I think the confusion might be it's not a table, it's straight columns.
Yeah. So what a column does, it reads that column and then it jumps over to the next column and reads it.
Okay.
And then it should go through the normal course of the reading order. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I think Joy answered it. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad I guessed right because it was a shot in the dark.
Well, because whenever there's a table, we're always worried about identifying the columns and rows, and that's why I asked.
That's what I was thinking you were thinking too, because we learned we've got to label our tables. We've got to label them. We've got to label them. And it looks like a table visually, but he didn't set it as a table. So
Are you talking about the naming the header row in a table to make sure it starts at the proper place?
Yeah.
I'm with you now, Jeffrey.
I thought maybe that applied to simple columns as well. So I'm glad to know it doesn't. Because in general, it just is a reason that I would be less likely to use columns because of the steps required when I use tables, you know.
Right. Yeah. I put this in just to give you guys options. The only time I probably use it is something like this to separate out a picture and my credentials and make it look more aesthetically pleasing, but it still read properly because I formatted it correctly.
Yeah, it looks great, and it takes less space on the screen too. So
cool. All right. So I'm going to scroll down to the table. If I passed it already. All right. So since it's already here, it's going to be a little different to put it in than normal. So normally you create the table and then you fill it out and you go and make sure the top row is the row header. Here, I'm just going to highlight everything. And then insert a table. Now, since I've done that, it's already pretty much correctly accessible. So you go down and highlight the top row, you right click, and go down to table properties, and go up the row, and make sure repeat header row on top of each page. And what that pretty much does, in case you have one of those tables that go down to another page, you'll still have the top header row so you can read the information correctly. Now, I got asked about blank spaces before in your tables. And my initial thought was no big deal, but doing some further research, you can handle a blank space in your table by putting this is a blank space or intended blank space or something in there for the screen reader, for the person who's running the screen reader to know that that's an empty cell and was left there on purpose, or you just put blank. That's probably the best way to handle it if you do have a blank space in a table. So that's how you insert a table, make it proper.
So, Amar,
And to check it, yeah.
if we're going to have a blank space in there and we want to put in, for example, the word blank or intentionally left blank,
Yes.
the screen reader will read it if we set the font color to match the background, yes?
Yeah.
So that visually people don't see the words, but it'll get read?
Yes, you can put it as white if you want. I don't like doing that because if you inherit a table or something that you get it anyway.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
It just confuses people if you give them a document and all of a sudden they're wondering why it's not formatted correctly or you can't do something in that cell. And then you got to figure out, you got to highlight it and make it visible. So personally, I just leave it, put blank in there or attention left blank or whatever you want to put in there. I leave it so people can see it. I think that's no harm.